Beverley is the county town of East Yorkshire. It lies where the chalk hills of the Wolds meets the plain of Holderness. It has everything. On one side it's surrounded by the open parkland of the Westwood. It has two stunning churches, the Minster and St Mary's, as well as two marketplaces. Almost all of its architecture is Georgian. That's around 1800. It's flat and easy to get around. However, you need to allow a day for a visit. We're entering Beverley across the Westwood, easily accessible from Hull, York or Driffield. But we're first going to look at a stone. It's out of sight because it's hidden by a field hedge on the right just after the roundabout. It's this stone post. 4 of these surround Beverley and mark the limits of the ecclesiastical jurisdiction of the Minster. It dates from around the 12th century. Those fleeing the law had to touch this cross first and then could seek sanctuary at the Minster. The Westwood was created as a result of a dispute between the Minster and local landowners in 1129, although the dispute wasn't resolved until 1380. It then became open pasture land and remains so today. There are 2 developments on it, both sporting. The racecourse at left was established in 1690 and the first grandstand built in 1767. Flat racing takes place here about 20 times a year. The other development is the golf club, although grazing cattle have the priority over the golfers. There were also 3 windmills that ground corn. Black Mill was rebuilt in 1803 and painted in tar to protect it from the elements. As we approach the town centre, on the right is a board which has the date 1836. This lists the rules and regulations regarding the Westwood. The land is managed by the pasture masters, who rent out invisible fields, called gates, that allow so many cattle, horses, even geese that can sustain them. Here, at the traffic lights, the town centre is at the right. But we're going to turn left down New Walk, although the first part of the road is called North Bar Without. St John's Roman Catholic Church at left was built in 1898. As the population of Beverley grew in the 18th century, this new road to Driffield was laid out in 1778 and became the fashionable part of the town. We're looking at Oak House that was built in 1880 for a master craftsman called James Elwell, and this is where he lived. We'll see more of his work and that of his son, artist Fred Elwell. James Elwell was also the architect of a house called Pinewood, with its distinctive carved panel, with a scene from Charles Dickens' novel The Cloister and the Hearth, and with the quote, "We like to go as near to nature as we can for 6p." Where the grass verge starts, that's the start of New Walk. We're going as far as the Sessions House. So called, this is where the local trials were held. Lesser misdemeanours were held at the Guildhall, which we'll see later, and murders and more serious crimes were held at the Assize Court in York. Today, the Sessions House is a restaurant. Note in the grounds by the road the unusual public toilet, although it is no longer in use. So let's go back to the junction. This area is called North Bar, due to the entrance gate of that name. We're going to go through it and along North Bar within to St Mary's Church. Before we go through the gate, the road ahead, Wiley's Road, bypasses the town centre. The road is named after Wiley's house that was demolished to create it in the 1960s. The properties on the corner were Georgian buildings, that's around 1800, and were refronted in 1883 for James Elwell and was part of his workshop, as were the adjoining properties. They are all covered with all sorts of carvings. Look, there are more political cartoons of the day. This one depicts Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli as a political cheapjack. It's dated 1892. This gable is covered in shields, figures and mythical beasts. Maybe this one represents a Green Dragon pub that stood in Saturday Market. The family owned the red brick house of 1795 attached to the Bargate, and this is where Fred Elwell had his art studio. The very fine house abutting the gate on the other side is Amphion House, where William Middleton lived. He was an architect of many buildings in the town. Let's look at the Bargate now. Beverley had 4 or 5 of these on the main roads in, and this is the only one left. But they weren't connected by a wall. Instead, there was a deep ditch with houses lining the town side of it. The gates served a number of purposes. They could be closed at night. Indeed, you can still see the doors today. On the inside are benches. On market days, collectors would collect the tolls here. They're obviously not designed for modern traffic. Indeed, buses had to be specially designed to go through the gate. The pedestrian tunnels on either side are of a much later date too. By Amphion House, this was built in 1793. And by Bar House, Fred Elwell's home, in 1867. By the pedestrian arch by Amphion House, look at the plaque set in the pavement. It tells how much it cost to build the Bargate between 1409 and 1410, £96, 11 shillings and 5 pence. Passing through the bar on the right is a former graveyard extension to St Mary's Church. It opened in 1829 and now called the Coronation Gardens. Opposite on the other side of the road is St Mary's Manor. Built as a house, it has been local government offices and is now apartments. Back on the other side is St Mary's Court, a timber frame building of the 15th century and sympathetically restored as a small shopping centre. Now we come to St Mary's Church. The Minster is at the other end of the town and trained priests and was largely a closed society. So the town needed its own church, and this was built as a chapel of ease to the Minster, and what we see today was built between the 12th and 15th centuries. In 1520 the tower collapsed and killed a number of people who were there during a service. The land around here is unstable because it's boulder clay. Go in, the church is open most days. It was extensively restored in the 19th century by some major Victorian architects, including Augustus Pugin and Sir George Gilbert Scott, as well as notable Yorkshire architects, including Cuthbert Broderick and Temple Moore. The altar reredos was carved by James Elwell in 1881. Look under the choir seats in the chancel. They date from 1445. The carvings are called misericords, misery seats, so called as the priest used to stand leaning against them during the long services. There are 28 carvings on the seats and were probably carved at the School of Woodwork at Ripon Cathedral. Look up at the ceiling. This was painted in 1445 and depicts all the 40 English kings up to that time. Some are imaginary to fill the remaining gaps. The carving of a rabbit on the door surround by the side chapel, well, it's actually a hare, is said to have given Lewis Carroll, the author of the classic children's novel Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, the inspiration for the white rabbit. What you couldn't see coming down the nave, as the pillar faces the pulpit, is a carving of a group of musicians. These are here because Beverley was where the Northern Guild of Minstrels met. They probably met annually and played alongside the mystery plays, enactments of Bible stories at a time when people couldn't read. There are also carvings of musicians at the Minster. In all, there are around about 140 carvings of musicians in these two churches. There are many other fascinating features here, including the font made of frostily marble, not real marble, but polished limestone that comes from near Durham. Across the road is the Beverley Arms, designed by William Middleton as a grand coaching inn, and is dated 1794 and built on the site of a bluebell where the infamous highwayman Dick Turpin stayed whilst awaiting trial in June 1737. It was eventually hung at York on the 7th of April 1739. The town centre is straight ahead, but we're turning left to go down Hengate. As its name suggests, this was once the area of a market where poultry was sold. At the rear of St Mary's is the War Memorial Garden. The unusual World War I memorial in the centre has at each corner a statue representing the armed forces and nursing. Behind, there's a smaller World War II memorial. You'll also see here on a wall a reproduction of a painting by Fred Elwell. He lived between 1870 and 1957. Some of his paintings of the town are placed in a location where they were painted. However, this depicts war refugees in his studio. By the traffic lights at the end of Hengate is this pub. It's got an old rocking horse above the door, as it is officially known as the White Horse, but locally it's known as Nellie's, after a landlady who retired in the 1970s. The building is a medieval timber frame building and is made up of a number of tiny rooms. It is very dark inside and still lit by gas lamps. We're going to turn right at the traffic lights. The road ahead leads to Hornsea on the coast. Wiley's Road comes from the left, but we're going to turn right down New Walkergate and then go right again down Walkergate. Walkergate is on the right and starts by the bus station, but is pedestrian access only from this end. On the right is a former almshouse for 6 women. It was built in 1731 and paid for by William Timperon. On the left is Walkergate House. As you can see, this was another wealthy part of the town when this was built in 1780. One notable owner was industrialist William Crosskill, who had a huge iron foundry in the town. His name is everywhere. Look at the base of some of the ornate lampposts around the town. Walkergate was once an industrial area itself. The name Walker might be a surname today, but a walker in the medieval period was someone who walked or trampled on cloth to felt it. In that period, Beverley was the 10th richest town in Britain. Tons of wool were brought here from the abbeys in the north to be exported to northern Europe, where it was made into cloth and then exported back. But Edward III in the early 14th century was having none of it and encouraged the English textile industry. Beverley was an important inland port. It stands near the River Hull, and the city of that name, 10 miles to the south, wasn't properly founded until 1293 by King Edward I. Trade guilds, and there were 38 of them in the early 14th century, checked on the quality of merchandise in the town. They made trade deals with other northern European countries and oversaw the 7-year-long training of apprentices. Roads to the right lead down to the main market square, Saturday Market, which we'll see at the very end, or they lead to the back of shops where goods can be unloaded. Walkergate still is very much a residential area. And at the end we meet the principal street of the town, Toll The unusual word gavel means toll, so really it is Toll Street. We'll be circling around to the street later on. We're bearing left onto Butcher Row and heading straight across Wednesday Market and down Eastgate to the east end of the Minster. The town has a huge variety of shops from major chains, but there are perhaps many more interesting smaller shops both on the main street and some of the side streets to explore. This is Wednesday Marketplace. It's very small by comparison to what it once was. It stretched from here all the way down to the Minster that you can see in the background at right. The area ahead was eventually filled in with shops and houses, and Saturday Market then became the principal market. Since 1997, Saturday Market has become so busy that Wednesday Market is used again. The busy road that crosses from the left was pushed through in 1846 and leads down to the railway station, which is on the Hull to Scarborough line. We're heading forwards down Eastgate. The left-hand side was once the boundary of Wednesday Market, and there's a mix of housing along the street. What was once a car garage on the right still has its old petrol pumps outside. The doorway just beyond is the old door of the nearby friary that we're about to visit. Before the east end of the Minster is reached, look to the left for these ornate gates that lead down to the old friary. The gates depict 2 black feathers. The Dominican friars were nicknamed ravens for the black cloaks that they wore. The feathers also represent the Guild of Scriveners, the quills that they used to write letters. The old friary is in private grounds that belongs to the Youth Hostel Association. As the old buildings are now used for accommodation. The friary was established here in 1240. Great cathedrals like those at both York and Ripon attracted friaries, nunneries and other religious houses. Indeed, there was another friary here that stood where the railway station stands today. Along with the abbeys, friaries were abolished between 1536 and 1539. It was subsequently divided into cottages until 1972, when it was owned by an industrial company that was stood behind, and they wanted to demolish it. It was saved and has been a youth hostel since 1984. What you're looking at is the guest accommodation of a friary. The chapel has been demolished. It must have been quite fine inside, as there are murals on the walls. The lane by the friary leads to the east end of the minster, but we're not visiting there yet, but taking a bit of a journey to see Beverley Beck, a waterway that led down to the River Hull and was instrumental to the trade of the town. We passed the Sun Inn opposite the east end that dates from the 1500s. Now we're crossing the Hull to Scarborough railway line. Flemingate at left is a shopping centre that opened in 2015. It takes its name from this street, Flemingate, so called because of a medieval woolen trade with the area of Flanders in Belgium. This area was once where Crossgill's iron foundry was, and there were also tanneries here. You'll note that all the houses are built of brick. There's a reason for this. The town is built on unstable boulder clay. This was left behind at the end of the Ice Age, around about 10,000 years ago. And if using stone, like the Minster and St Mary's, it had to be brought from a great distance. And also the weight of the stone on the unstable clay makes buildings sink, the reason why the tower at St Mary's collapsed. It can be made into much lighter bricks and locally made. Here we are at the Beck. This watercourse runs almost to the Minster, and the stone to build it was brought down here. At the Beckhead is a statue that depicts a creeler, a man who carried goods between here and the town centre. What we see today is the canal that was created in 1802. It leads down to the River Hull about 10 minutes walk away. Although Beverley lost its port trade to Hull, it was on the river in 1882 that fishing trawlers that could withstand Arctic conditions were built. The last was launched in 1969 and the last ship in 1977. At the end is the barge Sintan that was owned by a tannery and is now in the care of the Beverley Barge Preservation Society. Now let's return to the east end of the Minster. We're almost going to go in a circle clockwise to the south side before we go in. The word Minster originally meant a church where priests were trained. The church here was founded by John of Harpham and dedicated to St John the Evangelist. His statue is on the east end, alongside the medieval patrons, the Percy family, the most powerful family in the north. The church was established around 700, and this is the fourth church to stand on the site. The construction of what we see today started in 1220. It was rebuilt at the instigation of Walter de Grey, the then Archbishop of York. He was rebuilding York Minster at this time and decided that both Ripon Cathedral and Beverley Minster should be rebuilt, but not as large, using the same limestone from Tadcaster. Although the quarry is 7 miles west of York, it's 35 miles from here. The stone was brought down the river wharf at Tadcaster, along the Humber estuary and then up the River Hull to Beverley. The minster should have a central tower, but that collapsed under its own weight in 1213 after a fire. It might be surprising to find a field in the centre of a town, but this was once the Archbishop of York's palace, and that was destroyed around about 1540. Moving around to the twin towers on the west front, they're 160 foot high and built between 1390 and 1420. There are niches for 177 statues. No one knows whether they were all filled, and most likely they were destroyed at the Reformation. There is only one original left, that of Henry Percy, First Lord of Northumberland, who died in 1408. The statues seen today were carved between 1897 and 1919 and includes Queen Victoria. Look, there's one of Crosskill's lamps. Although the tower door is the principal entrance, the north door, the Highgate door, is used today as it faces the town centre and was at the top of Wednesday Market. The minster controlled the market. The inside of the west door has carvings of the four evangelists. The font here too is made of Frosterley marble and dates to around 1140, although the cover, raised and lowered on a pulley, is of 1726. The church is 332 feet long and was completed in 1308. The pews have been taken out and stackable chairs are now used so that nave can be used for events. In 866 the Vikings invaded and destroyed the church that stood here. The founder, John of Harpham, his remains were displayed and it was thought lucky to wear his symbol. In 934, King Athelstan, the first king of all England, came to Beverley and prayed at John's shrine for victory in a battle against an alliance of the Scots and Irish. He won and granted Beverley sanctuary status, and this has also led to pilgrims coming to pray at the shrine. His bones were kept in a casket near the high altar. At the crossing under the tower, we're turning left into the north transept, and this is where the shop is. We're passing back underneath the tower. There's a hatch in the ceiling through which stone can be raised and lowered. In the south transept there are war memorials to the East Yorkshire Regiment. They were based in Beverley between 1887 and 1977. Today, the Army School of Transport have a base in the town. The main memorial is to those who died in World War I and is based on the design of Edward the Confessor's in Westminster Abbey. Back at the tower crossing, we're going to enter the choir. The screen was designed by Sir George Gilbert Scott and carved by James Elwell and was completed in 1880. Look to the left of the altar, it's easy to miss. This is the sanctuary chair, the oldest item in the minster that is probably 10th century. This is where fugitives were run to sit to gain impunity. We know that 469 people did so between 1478 and 1539. The structure next to it, the Percy canopy, is early 14th century. The tomb was gone, but shows their power as it was adjacent to the high altar. Let's now have a look at the choir stalls. They, like St Mary's, have carvings underneath the seats. Coming back down the north aisle, the stairs today lead nowhere. They did lead to the chapter house where priests were trained. In order for the minster to continue as a church after 1539, thereby saving it, the chapter house had to be destroyed. We're now back at the top of the nave. The plaque on the floor is on top of the tomb of John of Harpham, or John of Beverley as he is better known. He was canonised in 1037 and so confusingly became St John as well. He was born at Harpham, about 20 miles to the north, in around 640 and died here on the 7th of May 721. Every year on the Sunday nearest to the 7th of May, children from his home village of Harpham come here and lay a posy of flowers on his grave, during a service to which all civic dignitaries of East Yorkshire are invited. The following week the choristers of Beverley journeyed to Harpham, a Roman settlement, where they processed from the church and blessed the well, said to have healing powers, although it's dried up today, and it's dedicated to their saint.
In the name of the three, Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Before you leave the minster, look at the north wall that runs up to the entrance. These minstrels are much easier to see, but not as ornate as the ones at St Mary's, but there are plenty more. You might recognise some of the poses, and those who are showing off. There are more to see on the nave columns, but you need your binoculars. We're going to turn left out of the minster's door and retrace our steps back to the West Towers, but this time continue straight ahead along Minster Moorgate, and at the end we're turning right onto Laregate and right again back into town along Champney Road. We're passing the former Minster School. And almost at the end, on the right, are the Wharton almshouses. They were funded by Michael Wharton, who left money for them in his will. Although he died in 1688, they weren't constructed until 1712, and are still almshouses today. At the bottom, we're turning right and joining the main road between Beverley and Hull. What looks like a chapel isn't. It's a memorial hall to those who died in World War I. On the opposite side of the road, and set in its own grounds, is Laregate Hall, now offices. They were built in 1760 for Admiral Walker. The architect was one of Yorkshire's greatest, John Carr of York. This street is one way, Champney Road, named after John Champney, a textile manufacturer who sold the land around 1900, but paid for the cost of building of a library that opened in 1906. We're now in the Civic quarter. The building left across the road is the registry office, and we're still following the library that was extended in 2007 with the addition of a treasure house. Here you can research about local history, or visit the museum on the first floor, and the art gallery that holds original paintings by Fred Elwell, who bequeathed 55 of them to the gallery. To the right at the top of the street is the modern Magistrates Court. This is where Railway Street that we saw earlier emerges. What is now the East Riding Theatre was once a Baptist chapel. We're following the road around to the left. This small building was once a gentleman's club and built in 1831, but it's dwarfed by County Hall. Beverley has always been the county town of the East Riding, with its courts and corporation. The riding was created over 1,000 years ago. With government reorganisation in 1889, the town became the official administrative centre for the county council. In 1996 it was renamed the East Riding of Yorkshire Council. The hall itself was completed in 1891. The odd building on the right was built as a school, the Square School, as the area in front was a square before County Hall was built. Straight ahead is Tolgavel, which we'll be coming to, but first we're turning left at the end of County Hall, and this imposing building at the end is the Guildhall. The building has a long history. You can visit. It's open on a Wednesday and a Friday between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. The frontage is the most modern part of the building. It dates from 1832. Inside, the courtroom is on the ground floor. It was remodelled in 1760 by architect William Middleton, but the building is even older. The corporation bought it in 1501, meaning parts of the building, like this woodwork here, is even older. The courtroom is unchanged since 1762, and although no longer in use, the new Magistrates' Court serves that function. Broadcast companies like to film period dramas here. No expense was spared in 1762. The ornate plasterwork ceiling was by eminent Italian decorative plasterer Giuseppe Cortese. A tiny steep staircase at the rear leads up to the magistrates' room, where the old bench is, locally called a bink. The magistrates sat on the upper level and these clerks lower down on either side. Back on the ground floor is a community museum of photographs and artefacts kept over the centuries. Let's go back to the end of the street. We're about to join Tolgavel again and go around Saturday Market and end at the ornate market cross. As the most important street, it has the biggest and most lavish lamp. It has a snake coiled around it. Again, it came from the Crosskill Ironworks and was given to the town when the family were mayors between 1875 and 1883. There are another two snakes nearby on this retail shop just beyond. This was once a chemist, and snakes are a symbol of the Greek god of medicine, Aeschylus. The street was pedestrianised in 1982. Look to the right here. Down here is the Methodist Church of 1891. At the bottom we look out onto Saturday Market. This is where the market still takes place on that day of the week and fills the whole of this square. We're going to go round it anti-clockwise. What looks to have been built, say, between 1780 and 1820 might not have been. The Yorkshire Bank was built in the 1970s, but to match what stood there earlier. The King's Head in the corner is original and dates to the mid-18th century. And this area of the market is called Cornhill. Saturday Market was created around 1300 when the Wednesday Market proved too small. It wasn't paved and became very muddy in wet weather until it was laid with stone sets in 1881 to keep shoppers' feet dry. The vivid terracotta building facing is the former Corn Exchange that was built in 1886 and in its history has doubled as a cinema, and since 2003 is the exclusive Yorkshire department store Brown's. Are they cream-coloured telephone boxes? Well, yes they are. Hull and Beverley are the only places in Britain that have had their own telephone company since 1902. The pub on the corner and the shops beyond are called the Butterdings. They were built on the site of a dairy market and end at Sow Hill, the former pig market. That ornate structure ahead is our final destination, the Market Cross. Beyond we can see the tower of St Mary's Church. All markets had to have a charter. Beverley's dates from around 1100 and would have been a simple post or cross. This was replaced in 1714 by this very ornate canopied structure. It was paid for by the town's two MPs at the time, Sir Charles Hotham and Sir Michael Wharton. The cross displays their coat of arms as well as that of Beverley, which incorporates a beaver. The name actually means beaver clearing. The plaque on top has a red Indian with feathers on his head and surrounded by drums, trumpets, guns and cannons. The other arms are those of Queen Anne, who was then on the throne. The canopy roof protected farmers' wives who sold butter and cheese underneath. The ornate Market Cross. If you enjoyed this film on Beverley, Howden and Heddon are nearby. Although smaller, they are just as interesting. We're always putting new content up on our channel, so be sure to stay in touch. Thanks for watching and hope to see you soon.